Hey everyone, it's Brett, and we are back, and we've got the world famous Heidi Gray McGill on the podcast with us. So, Heidi, come in and say hi to everyone.
Hi, and thank you so much, Brett. You cracked me up. I am super excited to be here.
Oh, we're so glad to have you. Do you feel world famous? That's what I want to
Oh,
know.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Welcome to the Bookish Introverts Podcast. Join host Amazon bestselling author Brett Nelson and avid reader Melanie Dyer as they dive in to review books they've read, then chat with the amazing authors behind them. Quiet minds, big bookshelves. You don't want to miss it.
Actually, it's pretty interesting when I look at my statistics from all the countries that have signed up for my newsletter. I have 41 countries represented. It's pretty exciting.
Wow, that is,
Yeah.
that's one thing I have not started as an author yet. I'm having trouble getting my newsletter started because I just can't get it worked out. I can't figure it out, and I just kind of gave up on it. But it's so cool. On my website, I mean, I've got tons of countries of people that
Yeah.
visit my website. Now, I don't know how much of them are spammers and how much of it, is actually legit. But it's the same on the podcast. My podcast host and I've talked about it, and it's amazing how many. Like last month, we had like 8 countries listen to the podcast. Not so
Yeah.
much on YouTube. We're not doing as well on YouTube, but the audio part of it, it's just like it's amazing. How do people hear about little old Brett, and
I
little old
know.
Hattie? Yeah,
Yes. Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
So what's the biggest country that other than the United States that you
So
see on your?
United States, Canada, and then comes Australia, Germany, India. I have a huge following in India, and those ladies just love my books. And then it just trickles down from there. But most recently, Brad, it was so exciting. Just actually 2 days ago, I got an email from a lady in South Africa. And she said, I just want you to know how much your books mean to me. And told me a little bit about her life and what she's doing. And I thought, God is the same everywhere. And that's just super
Yes.
cool.
It's so amazing to hear from people about your
Yeah.
books. I don't know about you, but sometimes as an author, I'm like, why do I even keep doing this? And then it seems like the minute you did that, the Lord's just like, okay, I'm going to give you a little dose of encouragement you need. And readers, oh my goodness, they just don't know how their words, we really need it sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. Honestly, there are days that I'm in the same boat. I just think, oh, Brett, why am I doing this? And I'm reminded a reader
Yeah.
listens to the prompting of the Holy Spirit and sends me a note, and it is exactly what I need to fill my cup to keep going.
Yeah, the Lord is so good to do that for us,
Yeah.
So we pour our heart into these books, and the readers get to enjoy that, and then in turn they give to us, and it's
Right.
amazing. Yeah, yeah.
Right. Right.
So I want to go into, actually, before we do that,
Mhm.
I'm going to give a little bit of a bio for anyone that may not have read any of your books, and if they haven't, hopefully after today we're going to rectify that.
Yeah.
But you've been married for over 30 years, according to
Yeah.
your website. You've got 2 adult girls, a
Mhm.
son-in-law, and 3 grandsons. Has
Yes.
that grown any since?
No, they are 5.5, 3.5, and 8 months.
Oh, I bet, especially 8 months. Little babies are so cute.
Oh, and he's a chunker, absolute chunker.
Oh, love them. And I've seen your pictures on social media. So yeah,
Yeah.
they're
Mhm.
adorable. So you kind of view your writing as a ministry, kind of, but not really an evangelistic writer. You consider yourself more of a hands-on craftsman, and you like to find unintrusive ways to weave God throughout your stories and into your characters' lives.
Yes.
And that's one thing I've only been reading Christian fiction for probably about maybe a couple years now. And my life has been enriched so much by switch. I still read some secular, but mostly Christian fiction now. And one thing I have noticed is, and I read an assortment of authors. I
Mhm.
read, Francine Rivers, very popular authors, all the way down to little people like me that nobody's ever heard of. And one thing I've noticed is there's a skill to writing Christian fiction in a way that doesn't make you roll your eyes. And, and part of that has to do with weaving faith in a way that it doesn't feel,
Yep.
do you think?
Absolutely. I'll give an example. Roseanne White, M. White, she wrote Yesterday's Tides. I just finished this book. fabulous, absolutely fabulous. She does not just give lip service to the Lord. She truly walks each character through a spiritual struggle. And it's fascinating to me. Like you just said the words that you've grown through reading the fiction books. And I am the same way, because when I can see God's hand working in the life of someone else from a bird's eye view, I know it's God. The reader
Mhm.
can see that in the book and they recognize it. And then all of a sudden it dawns on them, God's doing the same for me. But
Yeah.
we can't see it. We can't see God's hand all the time when we're in the midst of the struggle.
No, usually you can't. Yeah, you can't. You know, and a biblical story just popped into my mind as you said that. The disciples, when they were in the sea, the storm was blowing. Jesus was right there in the boat with them.
Right there, yes.
But they couldn't see their salvation right in front of them, you know, and we're the same way. We just, sometimes we're in the grip of it, and so we don't kind of see what we've got right there with us. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I need to add some of her books to my TBR. I haven't bought any of her books yet, but I've heard they're phenomenal. So,
Well, and her audiobook is out of this world. She has a phenomenal narrator.
Yeah. Well, another cool thing about her that I learned recently is she even designs her own covers for her books. That's amazing.
I know. I do not have the ability to both visually and written do the creativity.
Oh, see, and I have the desire. I would love to create my own covers, but I just don't have the artistic ability to do it. Yeah, and I have tried, but I don't have the artistic ability to do it. And that's one thing you should not skimp on. Your cover needs to look fantastic.
Right.
Yeah. So you're an avid reader. You enjoy wholesome and proper romances, clean mysteries, sweet historical fiction, and literary classics. Your books have been finalists in the Christian Indie Awards, the National Excellence in Storytelling Awards, the Royal Dragonfly Book Awards, and the CELA Awards, which kind of gives me a segue because one of is it the one that's coming out now?
No, it's the very first book in the series of my Discerning God's Best series called Desire of My Heart. And it's book one. It's an audiobook, and it did final for a CELA award.
It finaled for a CELA award. Yeah.
Congratulations to you on the same.
Oh, thank you. That's my first time. Now, I have had a couple of books that won, like I had one that won the Silver Award and the Global Book Awards. But this will be, like, to me, the CELA Awards is a lot bigger deal than that.
Huge.
Yeah. So it's so exciting. When I was watching that video and my name was called, I was like, oh, is this your first time? Is this your first time too?
It is, and I'm so excited. Yes.
Yeah. It's so exciting. Yeah.
So did you say you are going to be able to go to a Blue Ridge Mountains Christian Writers Conference?
Well, that was the plan. I don't know if it's going to happen now because I've just had a major house repair thing that has come up, so I'm not sure if it's in the budget anymore. But I'm still keeping it on the back burner because I'm like, this may never happen again. I would really love to go. So I'm still I'm watching airline tickets and everything, so hopefully I'll be there. So you are going to be there?
I am very excited. It's a 5 days worth of training for a writer and author, and it is just phenomenal. Not just what you learn from the fantastic speakers, but also just the connections you make with other authors.
Yeah, see, and that's kind of why I would like to go. I would like to make some there's a few that I've known and that I've talked to just because of the podcast or whatever, but I would love to start some relationships with other authors. Like, I would love that. So
they do have scholarships available. So might be something you would want to look into. Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's good. Yeah. And I didn't realize the conference was going on at the same time as the awards. Like, the awards was the one I was going to, but the last time you and I talked, you had mentioned that I guess the conference is going on. For those that are listening that don't know what we're talking about, that we're both members of the ACFW. It's the American Christian Fiction Writers Association. They do a big writers conference every year, and that's the conference we're talking about.
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of right in your neck of the woods. So do you usually go to that every year?
I do not go every year, but usually every other year. And the reason for that is the first year that I went, it took me 6 months just to get through all of my notes and do all the things that I learned. So I
Oh,
can't afford to
wow.
go every year. I got to catch up on my writing.
Exactly. You got to have time to write.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah, that's such and as writers, like, do you feel like you sacrifice a lot to be a writer?
That's a great question. So I want to answer that in a little pretty full, actually. It is never a sacrifice when you are doing what the Lord has called you to do. This
Absolutely.
And so that's key and most important. But I will say, my daughter needed me this week, and I just had to stop what I was doing, and family comes first.
Yeah.
I had other plans of writing. I had a deadline, and so I stayed up till 1:30 in the morning to get done what I had to get done. That was not fun, but
Yeah.
family always has to come first. And so, yes, that there are times when you do make sacrifices, but it's for a reason.
Yeah, exactly. Well, like for instance, last night, no, not last night. Last night was Friday. Thursday night, some friends of mine called and they were like, "Hey," and it was just sort of a last minute thing. "Hey, we're going to go out and eat. Why don't you meet us at the restaurant?" And I was like, "I can't because I got to write tonight." And so
Yeah.
in that way, and like you said, and of course, I was in the middle of writing, so I was kind of in that groove. And you know how it is. Once you get in that groove, if you
Once you're
stop,
there.
yeah, if you stop, it's hard to get that groove back. So I
Right.
was like, "Oh my gosh, I would love to go and see you guys and have dinner with you guys, but I got to stay at what I." So to me, that's sometimes you have to sacrifice
Yeah.
in a good way. You have to kind of
Yeah.
sacrifice things that
It's
you
just change of
would like to
priority.
do.
Yeah.
Exactly, and it's a priority. It's a discipline that you have to take on in your life
Right.
and do it. So
Right.
so I saw on here. Okay, now correct me if I'm wrong. I counted on Amazon. It looks like you've written 12 books.
Yes, it's very interesting. So I have a prequel that is for free when individuals sign up for my newsletter. They can
Okay.
find me on the web at Heidi Gray McGill. Just search my name. And that prequel, of course, is not available on Amazon. It is in both ebook form and audiobook form when you sign up for my newsletter.
Okay.
And then I have my series, which has now 5 main books and then an additional story that I wrote. It's called Stitched on My Heart. It's a companion novella. And then I've
Mm.
written 2 contemporaries that are in a small series. And then I have um, a standalone called A Bride for Harley, and it is also in Spanish. And
Hmm.
so, and then I have put a book together so that it does make for a lot of books, but I don't know it's probably, I don't know exactly my number.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's what I counted. But sometimes they're not all there, or
Right.
so sometimes people's earlier works aren't there. But it
Yeah.
looked like I was 12. So your Discerning God's Best, that's your historical fiction series,
Yeah.
and I've not read the earlier ones. I did read your most recent one, and it was phenomenal. We'll get
Thank
into that. Yeah, we'll get into that when we get into talking about the book. And of course, at the end, it mentioned that there's going to be a 6th in the
you. Yeah.
series. Do you have it like a do you know how long the series is going to be? Do you kind of have that mapped out, or is it going to be like, okay, you'll know you're done when you're done?
Actually, that's a really good question. I have learned to not put a cap on what God says He's going to do.
Uh-huh.
I do have at least 2 more books planned for this series, and I won't say no if He nudges me to write more.
Yeah.
The way that this series is going is I'm jumping through time. I'm moving forward through time. So I started in 1858. I'm now in 1878. And to continue moving is going to move me into World War I, World War II, and I'm not
Mm.
certain that I am capable of doing the amount of research necessary to make that book worthwhile
Yeah.
for a reader who loves that time frame in that genre.
Yeah.
So we will see what God has planned. I do have some side novels that I could work on.
Oh, okay. Like the beginnings of another series or some standalones?
Both.
Both.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So I think I know that I have a contemporary that I am really excited about. It's a more of a suspense. I have a canine book I'm working on. that is just kind of in the back burners. I have a scuba series that I'm working on that I'm rewriting and I'll republish. I took those back from the traditional author that publisher that I was with. And then I have a time slip that would tie my contemporary and my historicals together. And that's might be how I end up making that change.
Oh, okay. Okay. Now, I noticed on at least one of your books, I've been looking at several authors, so hopefully I'm not getting you mixed up with someone else. I noticed on at least one of your books, I don't know if it's technically an anthology, but like you wrote it like it's like one book in a series of several books, and several authors wrote like I think it's the tropical one.
Oh, it's well, there. Okay, so I've got two. I have one book called Broken, and it's an anthology. And I submitted, Brett, the most amazing thing. I'll tell you this quick story. So writers need to always know how to write from what they know. We just what we do.
Yes.
We don't want to take time or delve into something we aren't super familiar with, because it's a reader catches things that you miss. You've got to know what you're talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
So I was my local writers guild here where I live. They gave us 20 minutes and they challenged us to write a flash fiction piece. And they gave us a picture and we had to write something we did not know anything about. And Brett, wouldn't you know, I got a picture of the inside of a church. Now, that in my group, this writers guild, this is not a Christian group. And so I really had to think. And the first thing I thought of was, they said, okay, I want you to think about your character. What is your character doing? And the first thing I thought of was a woman on her knees just crying out to the Lord. And what is she crying out to the Lord for? And then I thought, okay, she's divorced. I don't
Mhm.
thankfully do not know about divorce. I've been happily married for 33 years and my family has not been deeply touched by divorce. And so it's something that I just am not familiar with. And so that's what I chose to write on. And in 20 minutes, I wrote this piece of flash fiction. Now, what flash fiction is it's truly a full story, start to finish. It has an arc, it has character development, and it comes to a conclusion at the end. And
Mhm.
less than 1,000 words. And so it was a challenge, but I did it. And when I was finished, I sent it to a girlfriend who had gone through a very, very difficult divorce. And I said, tell me, validate this for me. Did I get this right? And she emailed me back and said, I'm in tears. This is by
Wow.
far the most visual representation of what I went through, and I thank you for this. And so I thought, well, I'm not going to do anything with it. It doesn't fit my writing style. It doesn't fit my genre. It doesn't fit the readers
Mhm.
I have. And then on Facebook, it just came up. Somebody said, I'm looking for individuals to enter into this anthology. And so I looked at the other authors and realized that they were writing God honoring stories. I didn't know their type of writing, but I knew that they were God honoring individuals. And so I entered and it was accepted. And I feel really good about being able to publish that because it grew me as an author. And it's
Mhm.
always fun to do that.
Yeah. And do you feel like that sort of helped to grow your to grow your readership to be included in that body of work, or?
I do not feel that it helped me grow simply because of the type of writing that it was, but I will say this. I reached out to all of my ARC readers, my team, my advanced reader copy team, launch team, street team, they're called different things. And I said,
Mhm.
this is not going to be for everyone, but if you feel like this might meet your reading criteria, would you be willing? And I sent it, 14 said yes, and 10 came back and said, okay, I can follow through with this. One came back and said, I'm sorry, there were too many triggers. I didn't realize
Mhm.
what it was going to do, and so I couldn't finish. But they came back with some favorable responses. So I at least touched the lives of 14 people. And
Yeah. That
it
makes
doesn't
it worth
matter
it.
how
Mhm.
many? Yeah.
Yeah. Do you feel like your reader base, because I think you're mostly known for your historical fiction. Do you feel like you could depart from that and still retain your readership, or do you think historical fiction is pretty much where you're going to stay?
This is a great question. I would say 90% of my individuals, and I did a poll that not everybody responded to, but a good number responded. 90% of my people, they really just want only historical. But then it's almost 60 toward historical, 40 toward contemporary of which one they prefer. So there's a whole group of people who say, I read both, but I prefer historical over contemporary. So I do have a following in both ways. I think what I have learned is style of writing. So I did write a traditionally published scuba romance adventure series that I've pulled back, and I'm rewriting that now. And I wrote that in first person. And I have found that the majority of my readers like third person. That means when the reader is
Same.
reading the books, it says, she did such and such, rather than first person, which is I did such and such. And so I've really found that it's more about voice than it is about historical or contemporary.
Yeah. And I am one of those readers. Of course, especially if it's an author I'm not familiar with, I'll do the reading sample that's available on Amazon. And I'm the type of reader that will pass on a book if it's written in first person. I so much prefer. Now, that's not to say that I absolutely won't read a book in first person,
Yes.
because I have, but third person is I feel like third person just, I don't know if this is me, but first person feels kind of like an amateur writing style. I don't know why. And some readers would probably hate me for saying that, because a lot of people, that's their favorite. But yeah, so I kind of
I'll give you a copy of mine when it's ready, and we'll let you decide.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I would love that. Yeah, yeah. And that book, I can't remember that. It's a tropical one. I've actually got a copy of it in my Kindle. I just haven't read it yet. Yeah. So all right. Well, I saw on here that you one of your favorite verses is Samuel, 1 Samuel 1:18, where Hannah said, "May your servant find favor in your eyes." Then she went away and ate something, and her face was no longer downcast. Why is that your favorite scripture?
Oh, that is such a great question, Brett. So I'll tell you the funny side first, because she ate something and her face was no longer downcast.
Oh, I mean, how many of us can identify with that? Having a bad day, bring me some food.
That's right. It solves a lot of problems.
Yeah.
So, Brett, one thing that your readers may not know about me is that I am legally blind. So I have only less than 5% of my peripheral vision remaining, which means when I am looking at you at a normal distance, when we are standing across from each other, just having a conversation, and I'm looking at your eyes, I cannot see your mouth. And so I have such little vision. So if you reach out your hand to me, unless I just happen to see your shoulder move for some reason, I won't catch that you're trying to shake my hand. I just have to rely on that visual of what I'm seeing in your eyes.
Okay.
And I feel like Hannah wanted to see the whites of God's eyes. She wanted to be able to be so close to the Lord that that she could tell exactly what he was saying to her. And so she just beseeched him. She just sat at his feet. Didn't matter what people were saying. If they thought she was drunk, she just called upon the Lord. And there are times where that is all we can do. And we don't know what the future is. But there's even a little bit more to that. It's really the entire story that just grips me. And the other part is that God said, yes, you may have a child. But then God did something even more miraculous, is he gave her multiple years to raise this child. And sometimes, it's not hard. It's not easy raising a child. You're exhausted. You get a little sleep, they get sick. It happens. They're not perfect. They totally are reliant upon you. And so she had this joyous privilege of raising this child, even knowing that she was going to have to give him up at some point, but it didn't come easily.
Yeah.
She still had, we don't see that part of the story, but I know, I've been a mom. I'm a grandmom now, and I'm watching my daughter with this child who just does not want to sleep through the night. And
Yeah.
you're tired. And
Yeah.
so she was given the privilege, but she still had things that she had to do. And I think that God is saying to me, you have this privilege, but it won't necessarily be easy.
Yeah. Well, and it doesn't take long in the Christian life to know that very little is easy. But I will go back for just a second on something you said. And we kind of briefly had this conversation when we had Angela Hunt on. Um, about the untouched on parts about Hannah's life that we don't really get in the Bible. And I have learned, so I'm not a huge historical fiction reader in the past. It's not really has not been my, I think I'm going to have to stop saying that because I've read several that I've really enjoyed. So I think I'm beginning to grow in appreciation, and there's a good moral in that. Sometimes you just need to keep giving things a little bit more of a chance, and it can grow on you,
Yes.
and and we kind of talked with that because Angela Hunt had some, as we all do, you get not reviews that aren't exactly what you wish they would be. I really love biblical fiction, especially, and I was talking to her about sometimes people in her reviews, they don't like that you in historical fiction, sometimes you feel it in between the blanks, conversations that were had or places they went that's not in the Bible. And that's what I love about biblical fiction, that you get to see an author's vision of that character's
Yeah.
life expanded. I think that's so interesting. So tell me a little bit about your journey, your writing journey. How long have you been writing novels?
Okay. This is actually kind of funny. So, Brett, I started as an English as a second language teacher. And then I decided I really felt like I needed a daytime program for these people. And so I founded and was the director of an English as a second language program.
Oh, okay.
And um, and then what happened was COVID.
Ah,
It was one of those kind of things that had said I had been a beta reader, which is one of the first people that sees a book even before the
mm-hmm.
pre-team sees it, for several authors. And I got one book and it just was really rough. And I thought, oh my word, I can do this. And how hard could it be? Brett, it's really hard. You know that.
Yeah, it
It is
is
really hard.
very
And
hard.
so I had put some pen to paper. I had this novel. I went on vacation with my sisters. I read the book to them in the car, and they're like, "It's a great story. Don't you dare publish it. It is not ready. We love you too much. Don't
Yeah,
publish this."
yeah.
And so I just put it on a cyber shelf and said to the Lord, it was fun and I'm glad that I did it, but I don't see any purpose in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then when COVID hit in 2020, we closed the ESL program. It just was not feasible for us to meet, and our students needed the computer for their children to be able to, for they could do their e-learning. And so we could not meet. It was very, very disheartening. But I also decided it was time for me to retire. I'd done it for a number of years, and so we closed the program, and then I realized. I realized it before this, but I had a little panic moment because that ESL program was my platform to share Jesus Christ. I
Uh-huh.
am not one to sit across the table from somebody and just share my faith. I am not good at
Mm-hmm.
apologetics, meaning I don't know how to argue scripture. And I easily back down. I am not one. My parents never argued ever in front of us. I've never heard my dad raise his voice. And so I never learned to argue. And
Yeah,
so I shut down very quickly when someone challenges me. And so it's just not a platform for me to share Christ. And the way I had done it in ESL was I loved on those ladies. I mean, I genuinely loved on those ladies. And when they came to me and said, "Will you pray for me?" or "Why are you different?" That's easy. I can share that because no one's challenging me. So I didn't
exactly.
have that anymore. And I thought, you know what? I think the only other way to do this is I really felt God prompting me to do it through book because would have time then to figure out all the right words without making it sound preachy. And so in that very first book, I share the gospel in the very simplistic childhood format of the ABC formula in order to help someone recognize their need for Jesus. And then I have grown in my books and now have more spiritual themes, more scripture that leads towards repentance to help people from different walks of life and different where they are spiritually to grow in their walk with Christ.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. So you started around the time of COVID writing and publishing.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So what made you just choose? Yeah, because writing a novel is a huge undertaking. So what made you choose novel writing? Because I kind of, when I first started, I just wanted to see if I could do it. I've always wanted to. I just was like, I don't have that ability. And so one day I was just like, I'm going to try it to see if I can.
Yeah.
And so what made you choose novel writing rather than just blogging or, whatever?
Blogging didn't even come to my brain. And part of it is because I am not technically savvy. And so I figured that it was just going to be too hard.
Yeah.
I figured it out now, and I do it more as a devotional time in my blog. I do it every other week. Brett, I will have to say that I was the exact same way as you. Can I do it? I just wanted to prove to myself that I could. It helped that I have been reading historical fiction for years and Christian historical fiction. I knew what I liked. I knew what I didn't like. I knew the time period that I wanted to be in. I knew the area of the United States that I wanted to be in. And then there was one more factor, and that is Bob Hotstetler, he's an agent with the Steve Lobby Agency, once said, "Write from your scars, not your wounds." You don't want an open wound when you're
That
writing.
is so good.
Yes. And so I felt that I had come to grips with my sight loss, and I felt like maybe I could help someone else through this process. And so in my first book, Desire of My Heart, the woman does not lose her sight, but she has a tremendous loss, and it leads to subsequent depression. We don't call it that at that time. It's just that she's really struggling and what she walked through. And so I walked my faith. I walked through my faith in this story. And so some people in the very early stages said to me, "This doesn't seem realistic." And I thought, well, it's my story. I went through it. So I can attest to the fact that this is realistic.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then a couple people said, she fell in love too quickly. And I thought, well, I based that on my sister Devetta's love story. She fell in love in 3 days. She was engaged in 3 weeks, and she was married after several months. And so, it's every person's story is a little different, but this was me working through some of my own grief and my own scars.
Yeah. Yeah. Do throughout the series, does it follow the same characters, or is it sort of a new batch of characters with every book in the series?
Great question. So books 1 and 2, book 1 would have been like 150,000 words. Like it would have been a Harry Potter length book.
I made the same mistake in my first book.
Yeah.
It's 500 plus pages.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it is book 1 and 2 very much follow each other. They can be read as separate individual standalone books, but they are best read together, and they are mostly historical fiction with a romance in them. They are not that true typical historical romance. Book number 3, I got a writing coach, and she helped me learn to write just from 2 perspectives, and it is a true romance, and it follows right after the Civil War, and all the characters from books 1 and 2 move forward throughout my entire series.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to going back and reading the others now that I've read the last book in the series, or at least to date. So, but one thing to kind of go back a little bit on something we said earlier, I'm not a series person either. I don't like reading series, and I very rarely finish a series because I get bored with them. And so on my book, War Songs, it's a spiritual warfare and set during contemporary times. So I got done with it, wrote a next book. Then the Lord kind of put it in my heart to write a second book in the series. And I was like, Lord, no, I do not want to write. I don't like series. I don't like to read them. I sure don't want to write them.
Yeah.
But I just, you know how it is. You get something that just, it takes root in your heart and you just can't stop thinking about it. So I was like, okay, I'm going to have to do this. So muddled through it, got it written. And I think I wound up loving it. I love the book. So I even posted on Facebook. I was like, oh my goodness, I've got book 2 in this series done. I'm so glad to be done with it. Guess what happened? A third book in the series popped in my mind.
Right.
Which is what I'm writing now.
Yes.
And I'm just like, it's like God just has a funny little way of, you put your little caps on things and God says, well, you can just take that cap right back off because that's not my plan.
I want to just say something. You mentioned the words that it takes root in your heart. And in my first book, The Desire of My Heart in the Discerning God's Best series, Grammy, who is based on my mother, she helps Rachel walk through learning to listen to God's voice. And for someone who doesn't understand that, God never speaks to me audibly. Never.
I've never heard his voice. Yeah.
Yeah. And
if you're in tune to his spirit, you know when he's talking to you.
That is the key right there, Brett. It is not that I am being cliche and saying I hear God's voice. That's not what it is. It is there is a time when you are still in the presence of the Lord, and you just had this feeling. And a good way for me for someone who does not understand what that feels like. Have you ever been in a parking lot? You can't find your keys, and you're in your getting ready to try to get in your car, and the hairs on the back of your neck start going up.
Yes.
You just know something. It's just something, and it may be nothing, but you just have an awareness.
Yes, you listen to that intuition.
Yes, and it's that same positive feeling. And so when you stay in tune with the Lord, it's those moments of, is that you, God? Is that you? And then it happens again. And it's not because you've been sitting and dwelling on it and you're filling your mind and convincing yourself. It's just, you can't make that up. When you have the hairs on the back of your neck raised, you can't make that up. That's something. You probably need to turn around and take aware of your sense of your
surroundings.
Thank you, Brett.
Yes.
And that is when God speaks to you in that way, you need to pay attention and you need to be obedient.
Yes, absolutely. And sometimes being obedient, that's not what your flesh wants. Your flesh wants to do what your flesh wants to do. Right. But that's why the Bible tells us you have to crucify the flesh every day. So, yeah. So, all right. So tell me, from your first book to your last book, writing, you learn as you go along. I have learned that you learn different things about your writing style, about just how can you pinpoint ways that you've learned in the writing process from the first time you published a book to your last one?
Yeah. And actually I cringed a little bit when you said you were going to go back and read my first book, because the writing style is so different. When I first started writing, I just put words on the page. I just had to get that story out. And I have too many points of view, which means different individuals, you can hear and listen to their thoughts. From you're seeing it from their perspective, their point of view. I have too many of those. And so as I go through, by that third book, I'd learned to just have 2 points of view, and it makes it a little easier for the reader. But the thing I think I've learned the most, Brett, is I started as what's called a pantser. I wrote by the seat of my pants. I didn't know where this book was going. I didn't know how it was going to end. I just knew I had a story to tell, and I did it. Now, when I write, I have an outline, so it's more of a plotter. So I have an outline that I know, and the most significant thing is that I know what needs to happen to my character. So in this last book that I just wrote, Written on My Heart, Gabe comes from a very hurt background, and his background is tough. And he has just had not only shame put on him all of his life, but he just feels less than. He just does not feel like he measures up to what everyone's expectations are of him. And I know I have to get him to a place where he sees himself as God sees him. He is worthy. He
Yes.
is valuable, and he has a purpose. And so I've got to get him to this point. And so in that process, then I do have to plan out the steps that are going to happen, because I have to show his growth during the process. And I think that is
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I've learned to do a little bit better.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's why I always say, if you, especially if you're reading an author and you read their first book and you're like, not for me, don't give up on an author after they're based off of their first book, especially if they've written 8 others after it.
Yes.
Like I've got ads running on all of my books on Amazon. I don't even run ads on my first one, because I'm like, it's there if people read my other books and like, oh, I want to go back and see what else he's written.
Yeah.
But I'm like, and at some point I would love to go back in and redo that first book. That's my plan at some point, but I've got so many stories in me right now. Did you? I did that on my second book too, but I just haven't gotten to it on my first one. So yeah. So that's one thing I always like to say: don't give up on an author based off of their first book, because they're going to grow some. So yeah. So, what is some of the best writing advice you've received from someone?
What is some of the best writing advice that I have seen received from someone? Probably that you always should put family and faith before fiction.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
We are, as authors, there are some of us who that storyline is running through our brain at all times. It's like we can't shut it off.
You can't turn it off.
No. And then
sitting there eating Mexican food in the restaurant while everyone's, and you're thinking, okay, where's this going to go next? Yeah, how am I going to write this scene? Yeah,
right. And it's very hard to learn to shut that off. I am, as a female, I don't compartmentalize well, and so I have just learned that I truly have to be in the moment. I gave you the example of my daughter needed me the other day, and I just had to shut down, and my grandkids came, and I didn't do anything else. And actually, I missed a deadline, and that I needed to have something to somebody else by Friday, and I missed it, and so now it's not going to happen till Monday. But you know what? It's the Lord knows those details, because He called me to this as a ministry. And so he knows that if I can't minister to those closest around me first, to my neighbors, to my family, what business do I have reaching across the world to reach someone else? I need to be walking the walk.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. I've got one more thing I want to talk to you about, and then I want to go into the book. I want you to tell the readers a little bit about your book. But one thing that I found really interesting about historical fiction is that most of the people today have never lived in those times. And so how do you, as a historical fiction writer, tap into that period of time that you weren't even there? I find that so interesting.
I, first of all, read a ton, or have read a ton of books in that time frame. I will read anything by Laura France, Michelle Griep, Michelle Shockley, Rosanna White. These authors in this time frame, how they write just fills my cup, and it just helps me get a sense of what's going on. I also I do enjoy classic literature, and anything. Daddy Longlegs is one of my favorite stories. Anything by Montgomery, the Anne series. So keeping myself.
We did a podcast episode on one of her books.
Oh,
yeah,
fabulous.
Yeah.
Keeping myself in that time frame is what happens. And I'm going to give a movie reference. I'm going to go blank on this name. It's Christopher Reeves, takes place on Mackinac Island, somewhere in time. Boy, that took me a minute. It's that concept of this is a time travel, and he just thinks and thinks and thinks and gets himself emotionally, you never know if he truly goes there or not, but he gets his brain back to, by doing whatever he does, to get himself back into this time frame where he meets this woman.
Mm-hmm.
There is something to that. You can't just sit down and just start writing. You've got to make sure your brain is in the right place before you start fitting
Yes.
yourself into that position. But
Yeah, I would imagine so.
yeah, it's something that someone said to me that really helped me was the timelessness of God's word is it's timeless. It's forever.
Yeah.
It
Mm-hmm.
fits in every generation. But you do have to think about your word choices to make sure that they fit the era that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
I can't use the word. I said he had piddled away his funds. Well, a contemporary reader said, that sounds like he's using the restroom, right? Yeah.
Not
Okay.
in the context of the story, though.
Right. In
Yeah.
that time frame, so I changed it to frittered. And then a friend of mine said, "Well, I hope I'm not hungry because that's what I'm going to think about." And I'm like, "Oh my goodness." Um, but it is you have to consider all the details
Yes.
of how the book is going to be perceived by the reader.
Yeah. Which is such a difficult thing as an author because no matter how good it is, you just can't to please everyone, and it's just, and it's so hard to, yeah, it's a very fine line to tread as an author. So
Right.
yeah, I was like, I find it so interesting that to see kind of how people can write about a time that none of us have experienced. I mean, some of us have a little bit more than others, but yeah, it's just, and your book takes place, I think, in 1870.
Yes.
Is that right? Yeah. So
Yes.
literally no one alive has encountered that time period.
Right.
So yeah. So take us into the book. Tell us a little bit about it. It's called Written on Your Heart.
Yeah, so Written on My Heart, it is book 5, and it is truly a standalone in my series. So to take you back a little bit, my first book introduces 2 young children, Thomas and then Gabriel. His Arapaho Indian name is Little Sun, and part of it is because he always has a smile on his face. He has an encounter with an angel in book 2, and he asks, when he accepts Jesus, he asks for his name to be changed to Gabriel, just like Paul and Saul, the name change
Oh,
there.
wow. Yeah.
And so we know he has a spiritual heritage. He has a commitment time. We know that he has had a life-changing experience. But by the time we get to book 4, so much has happened to this young child. He because of his half Arapaho Indian heritage, the fact that now all of the Indians have been moved to reservations in our historical time frame, and he's not there. So he is in a small town called Shumard Oak Bend, Missouri. And he is struggling, Brett. He is just struggling because in book 4, he wanted to go to medical school with his best friend Thomas, but the university will not allow him because of his heritage. So he ends up working the mines. He's brilliant. He was top of his class, but he is not able to use this knowledge and this desire and this God's gift that he has because of his heritage. And so even though we know he has this background of faith, he is struggling spiritually. And well, then he also contracts lead poisoning from working in the lead mines. And
And that was actually mentioned in book 5. Yeah.
Yes. And so he is sick. And so now he's not only struggling emotionally and spiritually, he's struggling physically as well. And this character has to make it through to an acceptance of he's being made the way God has made him and that he can conquer. Well, he is as now is deputy of the town. He comes back from the mines. He gets some help, and he's now deputy. And he knows already Betsy, who is the school teacher. She's a couple years older than he is. They went to school together as children. They've been friends. They've never been close, but they've been friends. And he realizes that she also is struggling with something. And so in walks Luther Conrad. Now I'm going to
Yeah. She
let,
and her family are going through a very difficult time in this book.
yes. And so he resonates with that. Well, Brett, a little bit about who I am. I told you my parents never argued. I don't do well with conflict. I had to write this bad guy, and he's just downright slimy.
He is.
He's nasty.
But
And
I can respect a good villain. Like
oh,
my podcast host Melanie, she
yeah,
loves to hate villains, and I'm like, I can respect a good villain.
he is truly a good villain. But let me
He
tell you, that
is.
was hard to write because I not
Was
only
it?
had to get in his mind, I had to get under his skin. And there were times I just got the heebie-jeebies. I'm like, man, this guy is just disgusting.
Did you
He is
ever can
ridiculous.
think, okay, am I writing him too bad?
I
Did
don't
that
think
ever?
so because
Yeah. Okay.
I'm sure he could be worse, but I'm glad you said that. I am also very, very careful. First of all, I would hate to offend someone, but second of
Yes.
all, I do not ever want strong triggers to throw someone out of a book. Um,
Hmm.
and we have all come from different backgrounds, Brett. We have had different experiences, and there are some women who, well, even men, who are going to read this book, and it's going to make them struggle with. Well, no, I should say I don't want them to struggle with fear. I want
Hmm.
them to see the reality of what deception and what manipulation can look like, and help them
Yes.
recognize it through God's eyes.
Yes.
So Gabe, our hero, he struggles with identity crisis. He struggles with prejudice horribly. And so I wrote this story with a little bit of a Louis L'Amour feel. Now, if you are familiar
Okay.
with those
Yeah.
really old westerns,
Uh-huh.
they're some of my favorites. I love a good western. There's not the swearing, you got the gunfights and you see them go down, you never see the blood.
Yeah.
That's kind of the feel that I was going for. And again, it stretched me as an author. I don't
Which
just
is good.
Yes, I had to take a different viewpoint on this book, and my readers so far have loved this.
Oh,
I
good.
cannot tell you, 9 out of 10 people are saying to me, I could not stop reading. You kept me on the edge of the seat. I didn't know what was going to happen next. That was
Yeah.
a good feeling on my part to know that I created characters strong enough that people were invested.
Yes. And as I was reading it, there was one thing that kind of popped into my mind because again, as authors, we have to be so careful. Like we literally have to walk on eggshells because you can offend somebody with something that was never your intention, but they take offense to it or they take, it triggers them or whatever. And was it what's the villain's name again? Conrad?
Luther Conrad, yes.
Luther. Yeah, Luther. Is he the one that sort of has like the sort of the prejudice against the Indians?
Yeah.
And as I was reading it, because as an author, I was like, were you hesitant to sort of even mention that in the book? Because in my mind, I didn't really consider that
What
prejudicial or racist because I can keep the context of that time period in my mind and remember, okay, this is a product of the time. And I want to preface, there's nothing overtly racist in the book.
Yes,
This is just something that went through my author mind. Like,
yes.
did you hesitate to even make any mention of that for
This is such a
fear?
great question because I want to tell you the value of a reader and the value of a review.
Yes.
So I wrote in my first book about this Arapaho Indian family. And
Mm-hmm.
a reader emailed me and they said, I don't feel like you did justice to the American Indian, the indigenous people. I feel like you were not courteous to their plight. I thought you did
Mm-hmm.
a great job with your African American characters, but I just felt strongly that you could have done more. And we emailed back and forth. This girl is just precious to me. She was honest, but she was not, she didn't attack me. she let me know her heart. And so I did two things. First of all, I took my books and I did what's called a sensitivity reader. And
Yes.
I asked someone else, at African American descent, to please read my books. And they said,
Mhm.
no, this is the time frame. They were uneducated. That is how they would speak. You need to keep to what you've done. Do not change that because of what today's world says that it is not politically correct.
I think a lot of readers these days, they read, especially when you're reading historical fiction, because I
Yes.
don't read reviews to determine if I want to read a book or not, because if I want to read a book based on whether I think the book sounds good. So
Yeah.
I don't really use reviews in that way. But after I finish the book, I'll often go in and look at reviews just to kind of see what, and especially when it comes to historical fiction, I've noticed that a lot of the reviews are it's not because they hated the book, it's because they're reading historical fiction through the filter of modern times. And you
Very well.
have to, yeah, and you have to have the ability, if you're going to read historical fiction, you really, and this is coming from somebody who doesn't even, that's just now starting to read a little bit more of it,
Mhm.
you really have to be able to have the ability to read historical fiction through the eyes of the era that you're reading. Otherwise, you can't write modern day sensitivities into historical fiction books because it's not going to be real
Right.
to the
Right.
time. Yeah. So do you find that in general most of your readers are pretty good at that?
Yes, because most of my
Yeah.
readers, like I said, are they understand historical fiction. I will say that I did add at the end of my book, I did add a paragraph just saying to my reader, I want to be sensitive, but I needed to be
Hmm.
historically accurate and God honoring.
Yes.
I'm careful with word choices. I would never use a swear word in a book. And just like I would never do that, I would never downplay a race because of a vernacular use of a word.
Yes. Again, you learn as you write. I think it just sort of maybe to you becomes intuitive
Yes.
somewhat the more you write. And sometimes I think even through the process of like, ooh, okay, I did that and I don't want to do that again. I don't want to make that
Yeah.
mistake again. Or,
Yeah.
I've learned from reading reviews, you never kill an animal in a book. You never, it's like, you know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
thankfully, I've never done that. I don't even usually put animals. Thunder was a hoot. I loved Thunder in this book.
I
And I'm not even a
I
horse person.
I love to give my animals personalities, and in every one of my books there will be an animal with a personality.
Yeah, and Thunder, his personality definitely shone through. I loved Thunder. I was like, oh my
Yeah.
goodness, you
You can
did
see that
such a
horse
good
roll his
job.
eyes. Thank you. Now, when you see the horse roll his eyes, you know.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. So if you like horses, if for no other reason than that, you ought to read this book because Thunder,
Thank
his
you.
personality really came through.
Oh, good.
I don't think I've ever read a book where I actually fell in love with an animal before, but by the
Yeah,
end, I
that's
was like, oh my
awesome.
gosh, I love Thunder. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank
Now,
you.
does Thunder
Mhm.
come? Does he is he in previous books with Gabe, or is this his first
No,
appearance?
no, this is his first appearance because at the
Okay.
beginning of the book, he's only had him for about a year and a half. And
Okay.
so, yes, so he will be in other books, but usually I choose a different animal in each book to
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
a little
Variety.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
tell me, Brett, what are your thoughts on the book, and what did you find most moving?
Some of the, and I actually wrote this down. There were some really good lessons in the book that I sort of picked up on. One thing was people will remember what they want about you, even after God has forgiven you. That doesn't, whatever they think of you does not negate God's forgiveness.
Right.
That's amazing. I love that, because we are, we're all human. We're
Mm,
fallible. We mess up
yeah.
despite our best attempts. Being a Christian doesn't automatically, and like people, especially in the secular world, they'll be like, "Oh, well, you did blah blah blah, or you said blah 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 blah. You're a hypocrite." No, I'm a human just like you are.
Right,
You
right.
know,
Yeah,
and sometimes, and even in the church, people hold you. People hold your mistakes and your weaknesses and your,
yeah,
sometimes they'll hold that against you. And I just love that you pointed that out, that just because people don't want to let you off the hook, God does. And I love that.
yeah, yeah.
Was that something intentional, like that you wrote into the book, or
Those things just come, and it just flowed, and I don't even know where that came from.
don't even
So,
know where that came from? Yeah,
yeah.
well, that's something that really jumped out at me. Another thing that kind of jumped out at me was, if you believe only what men say about you, you'll always be a lost cause.
Mm,
Trust what God says about you. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. Again, this is why we have to be so careful as humans, as people. And I'm pointing at myself at this. I have a mouth on me, and sometimes I use it. And but we, yeah, shocking, right? anyone that I'm friends with on Facebook knows. But I love, as humans, we have to be so careful, because our words can really cause so much damage in people's lives that you don't even know. So that was one thing that just sort of popped up in me throughout. I can't remember if someone read that or if that was just part of the narrative, but
I think it was part of the dialogue. Yeah.
was it? Yeah, yeah. I really like that. And then, God's plans are not always easy to understand, but they're never wasted. That's an amazing. So there's little nuggets in there that just sort of jumped out at me, and the things that jump out at me may not jump out at other people. I think
Exactly.
that's I think one good thing about Christian fiction.
Yes.
If God draws you to a reader to that book, He's going to highlight the things that reader. It's almost, I don't want to equate Christian fiction with the Bible, but when you read the Bible, it does the same thing. You
Yeah.
can read the Bible cover to cover, and things that you can run across something that you're like, how have I never read that before? How have I
Yeah. How
never?
did I miss that? Yeah.
Yeah, but it's because God's Spirit illuminates certain things, and I think in His goodness, I think God sort of works that way through our Christian fiction too. I think He can illuminate things in our words that maybe a reader needs to see or needs to hear or needs to remember.
Yeah.
So, do you kind of feel that way?
Oh, absolutely. It's what season of life are you in? When I
Yeah,
had toddlers, and the only time I had for quiet was when I was in the shower, and it wasn't even always then.
yeah,
That's a season of life that their verses mean a little bit different than they do now when I'm a Grammy and I have more quiet time.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah.
I have read books multiple times, and the same book, and every time something new will come up, just like scripture.
Yeah, yeah, and that's my prayer when it's published books. It's so scary to put a book out there, because we just live in such a hyper critical world. I mean,
Yes.
people will literally read your book, and like 99% of it, and give you a bad review because one thing in it they didn't like.
Yeah.
And it's like, it really is hard to put a book out there,
Yeah.
because you're literally putting yourself out there to
Oh,
potentially billions of people.
Brett, if I was not doing this for ministry and knowing that God would do something with my efforts, there
Hmm.
are times that I would have just dissolved into a puddle.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
I
Yeah.
remember the day that I had my first 1-star review, and it was on book one, and the individual said this could have been an exceptional story, but the author ruined it with a wink, ad nauseum. And I was so devastated, and I showed it to my sister, and she burst out laughing. She said, "Oh, that's good. That's really good." And I thought, you know what? It is good because it validates one negative, validated all those other 5-star reviews that I had. And it said to
Yeah.
the reader, sometimes it depends on the reader's perspective. And whatever about
Exactly.
that wink really irritated that woman. And at least she
Yeah.
was kind in how she said it. She didn't bash me, you know,
Yeah.
but the ad nauseum was enough to it caused a chuckle.
Now, but now that person has left that review, does that sort of echo in your mind as you're writing? And was it winking? Do you feel that you use that less now?
You know what? No,
Oh,
because
really?
no one, I have 1,600 reviews on that book and no one else mentioned it. So,
Okay,
so
that's
often,
telling.
yes, so often when I read a review, I have to look and say, what is the reader going through? If they are in attack mode, then I am just like, you know what? This really has nothing to
Yeah,
do with my writing.
yeah.
They're struggling. And honestly, it's easy to pray for them.
Sometimes they review through the lens of what they're going through in their life.
Yes. Yeah.
The tone of their review is really a reflection of what they're going through. Yeah.
Yeah. So I told you that I rewrote book one. And the reason I rewrote it was because I had enough comments in reviews that were consistent that said something was not right, that I realized if this many people are kindly, nicely
Yes.
saying to me, author has a little issue here, it's worth it for me to make the effort to do something. If only one or two had said that, I probably would have let it go. But
Yeah.
because there were 5 or so, I said, you know what? That's 5 people who all they care about is they're not trying to bash me. They're trying to help me. And I'm going
Yeah.
to take that for what it is and I'll fix it. And I did. And it has
Yeah.
made the story better.
Yes. And that's one good thing about reviews.
Yeah.
I've learned, and I just cannot get the number of reviews that I need. And that is one of my struggles as an author. That
Yeah.
really plays with my mind. I'm like, why are people not reviewing my books? I should have hundreds of reviews.
Yes.
But you can use those negative reviews to help you sometimes, and
Yeah.
I'm kind of susceptible to things like that as a reader. In fact, one I just read, every time you turn around, like instead of a character laughing, laughter would gurgle from their throat,
Yes.
or it would shake from their throat.
Show it.
And yes, and I am not kidding. From the time I started counting
Yes.
to the end of the book, I counted that phrase like 103 times. And I didn't even start counting until like a quarter of the way through the book. So I am kind of susceptible to kind of annoying repetitions.
Yes.
But yeah, I think
Well,
even the bad reviews can serve a purpose.
yeah, and actually, I love that you brought that up because in this latest book, you received an ARC copy, an advanced reader copy, which means that you guys, those that receive that copy, they're in my team. They are the last ones to have eyes on something. And I had used some of the same phrases more than 30 times. And readers pointed that out to me. And so that gave me time then to go back. So if you are an individual who that you do see those patterns, things bother you, you are a great person to put on an ARC team, a street team, a launch team, whatever it's called, because those individuals, if you have a heart for helping an author, you aren't trying to make them upset. You just want them to know that it pulled you out of the story. Then that's your
Yes.
job. That I want that feedback. And so I can't even remember there because there were 3 instances where I overused a phrase. And I went back in and I just changed it up. It took me very little time to make the story better because those readers were willing to say, you need to fix this. So it's wonderful.
Yes.
And then I also want to tell you, you had said, you're having trouble getting reviews. When I took the number of books that I have sold in my lifetime, including ones that I have given away for free for different reasons, only 10% of people have left a review on my book.
Yeah. Well, and that's
10%.
actually statistically 10% is actually on the higher end of the people that normally review. I went to a writing seminar. It's been a couple years ago now. I can't even remember. I think it was Alexandra Torre. Have you ever heard of her?
Oh, yes.
I think it was one of hers. Yes, yes. And statistically, according to whatever expert that was doing I don't even remember who they were now. Statistically, according to them, you have to sell 1,000 books to get one review.
Yeah.
And I know that is a true statistic. I think it's probably been about 3 years ago now. on my book, When Raindrops Fall, I did a free book giveaway, a digital book giveaway,
Yeah.
and sold like over 10,000 books in like a week, a weekend's time.
Yes.
Got 10 reviews
Yes.
out of that 10,000, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
it,
Well, dear reader, even if you borrow it from the library or
yes,
just all it takes is even if you borrowed it from your neighbor or your church library or wherever
yes,
you got it, all it takes is for you to go on to you can always go to Amazon. Sometimes they won't always accept it, but you can go to Goodreads and you can
yes,
sign in and you can say, I borrowed this from my library. I borrowed this from a friend. My aunt, grandma,
yes.
let me, and I
Read
just,
it on Kindle Unlimited.
yes, whatever it
Yes,
is. And you can put that in there. And that Goodreads number now shows up on Amazon. And it's
yes.
fabulous. It's
It
fabulous.
is, yeah, yeah, and I don't think readers do it intentionally. I think they just don't understand the importance of their reviews. I think that's
Yeah,
really all it is. A lot of readers just don't understand the importance of it, because I know until I became an author, I didn't understand the importance of
right.
it. So, but I do think that statistic is true. You have to, like, you really do have to. The biggest majority of readers just do not leave reviews,
Right.
and yeah, I would really like. I've got one book that has over 50 reviews, and
Yeah, that's
so it's
great.
just,
Yeah.
yeah, it's got like 53, I think. And I've got one, my war songs one. It's like at 48. So I'm like, I need two more. So,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah,
a
I don't
couple of
think there's
people,
some magic number to 50 with the algorithms, but I do know that it does, in a reader's mind, probably carry more weight when it's above
it
50.
does. I think
And
it does. Yeah.
it's so hard to get there unless your launch team, your street teams, unless all of those individuals are leaving a review. It's really hard to get past 10 in the first month because it
It
takes
is.
people time to read. Oh, I wanted to add something else. You mentioned Kindle Unlimited. If you are a Kindle Unlimited reader, that's a
I
program
am.
that you can
Mhm.
purchase through
Yeah.
Amazon, and you get to read just like you can download books from Audible and listen. Kindle Unlimited, you can read unlimited or at least a
Yeah.
certain number of books a
It's
month.
basically the Netflix of books. You pay up a
Yes,
subscription and you can
yes.
read as many as you want in a month. Yeah.
So please go, and when you are reading a Kindle Unlimited book, when the book says the end, don't stop. Keep turning those pages all the way to the end, even if you're
Yes.
just skimming. And the reason, as an author, I get paid
Per page.
0.000
Yeah.
point whatever per page. I'm not a math person, obviously. It's
Yeah.
businesses, but I get paid per page. And so
Hmm.
when you go to the end of my book, it does two things. Number one, if my book is 500 pages long, but the last 20 pages are about the author, more books from this author, what's coming next from this author, the acknowledgement page, any of those pages, Amazon is saying, well, they're not reading all the way to the end of the book. And so it hurts the algorithm.
It hurts
So
the
you,
algorithm.
you really want to scroll through to the end of that Kindle Unlimited book. It takes you seconds, maybe even 1 second to flip
Yeah.
through all of those pages. And then it almost always, I have never experienced it not doing this, it will bring up a page that has a place for star reviews. And if you are
Hmm.
not going to leave any written review, at least tap the number of stars.
At least leave a star review.
It
Yes.
does matter. Yeah. For written reviews are important, but star reviews are just as important.
Yeah. And I always tell people it doesn't have to be a beautiful, flowing, amazing review. It can be, I loved it. I mean, ideally, reviews help other readers to
Yeah.
can help determine, especially if you're an unknown author. So ideally, you do want your reviews to have some substance. But
Yeah.
if literally all you can do is say, oh, hey, I really enjoyed it,
Yeah.
that's better than nothing.
Well, Edie Melson, she's the director of Blue Ridge Mountain Christian Writers Conference. She teaches courses all the time. And one of the things she suggests is that 8 words is all you need.
Uh-huh.
And even if you only say in that upward comment section where it kind of gives you a caption of what you're going to read, I couldn't put this
Hmm.
down.
Yeah.
This book is a must read for anyone who loves Christian fiction. Um, anything is, it's what you would say to someone when you were in an elevator and they say, what book did you just read? Well, I just read Written on My Heart. Well, did you like it? You're not just going to say yes. You're going to say, oh, I absolutely loved it. It was a really good Western.
Yes.
It's just that easy.
It is, and the funny thing is, I get surprisingly quite a few emails from readers, especially from my very first book, A Christmas to Live For, because
Yes.
it's from the perspective of a male eating disorder. And I get surprisingly a lot of emails from people that have gone through eating disorders, and so that book really resonates with them. And war songs, those are my two, and the war song series, those are the ones I get the most emails about. And I get these gushing emails from people, oh my goodness, the war songs just made me, in fact, I just got one recently where the woman said, I read the war song series, and it literally, seeing how the spiritual world interacted with your characters. Now, of course, the characters don't know, or they're not aware of what's going on around them in the spiritual realm. But she said, seeing the sort of the way the spiritual realm interacted around their characters, she said, it really did something in my heart. She said, I left a very active, sinful lifestyle because of that book, because it made me realize there's more than what I can see going on around me.
Yes.
And so, of course, as an author, I mean, that just breaks you to hear that.
Oh, yeah.
And so, of course, I responded, and we we wound up talking back and forth for several emails. And I said, if I would love it if you would go and leave a review on that book. And she was like, oh, I'm not a very good writer. I don't know what to put in our review. I was like, okay, condense down what you've told me in this email. That is a great review.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think we have fear. I don't always enjoy leaving reviews either. And it's because, what if I don't say it right? I look stupid. Well,
exactly.
The truth is, it's not that so many people are actually reading your review, but those algorithms, those bots, the computer side, they are recognizing that you took the time. That
they are
what is important. There's another step to that too. So if you are a huge Christian reader, you just read all kinds of books, or you love historical, or whatever it is that people write, when you leave a review, then what happens is the algorithm says, oh, they really liked this one. We'll show them more like this. And so it helps you to then
as
get
a reader
recommendations. Yes.
Yeah, which the algorithm probably hates me because I'm a very eclectic reader. I read contemporary. I've just started dabbling in historical. I've learned I really love biblical fiction. But I recently read, have you ever read Lynette Bonner?
Oh, yes. She's a fabulous friend.
I just read one of her books. It was the Oregon Trail book. And again, it was the last one in the series. So now I'm like, she's a phenomenal writer. I really enjoyed that book.
Same audiobook narrator.
Do you really?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
He's got some great books out there.
Yeah, that's the only one I've read. So I'm adding her to my list of authors that I really want to read. Of course, I really enjoy Angela Hunt. She's one of my favorite biblical fiction authors. Lynette Bonner does more historical fiction, not really biblical fiction.
Misu Andrews. Have you read her?
I haven't. I've got several of her books in my Kindle. Is she the one that wrote the cook, her newest one, the Queen's Cook? Is that Misu Andrews, or is that?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, there's another one that's wrote. It's Misu Andrews, and there's another one that's sort of. I'm blanking on her name. Anyway. I've got
Tessa Ashfar is another
fabulous. That's the one I'm thinking of. I've got her newest book in here that we're going to do on the podcast at some point.
Oh, so good.
Yeah. So, I'm just a very eclectic reader. I've gotten so used to saying, "Oh, I don't really enjoy historical fiction," but I think I'm going to have to alter what I'm saying because what I've read, I've really enjoyed. So maybe it's just the quality. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know why I had it in my head that I don't like it.
As we age, also, I think that we just learn. We like different things. So Sometimes
Yeah.
we need an escape from the reality of today, and going back to simpler times is really
I
nice.
and I think that may be part of it. There's just automatically a sense of nostalgia that's attached to historical fiction books, because even though they're going through their own adversities, and the things that they're going through in the book, there's still a sense of nostalgia to that. Even though I never grew up in those days, it's just you can just automatically tell this is just a simpler time,
Yes.
and so maybe
Yeah.
that has something to do with it. Yeah, and I have an idea for a historical fiction book I want to write. I have been
Nice.
tossing it around in my mind for probably about 2 years now. It's actually biblical fiction. It's not historical fiction.
Okay.
And I just haven't started it yet because I don't I don't know how to write historical fiction
You
because I
just
wasn't
do it. You just do it. And then you
just
go
do
back
it.
and you figure it out. Yep. Get that
Yeah.
story down.
Yeah. So, I think what I'm going to do that's kind of why I've been reading more historical fiction and biblical fiction, because I sometimes I think you learn by immersing yourself in whatever you want
Yeah.
to learn,
Yeah.
and of course I know there's a certain amount of research that goes into
Yeah.
writing things like that too. So I really started reading historical fiction, biblical fiction. Well, the first reason I started reading it was because we had Angela Hunt. Angela Hunt's The Woman from Lydia. That was the first historical fiction book I've ever read.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
Fabulous.
other than years ago, I did read like the Laura Ingalls Wilder, but that was when I was younger. So that was really and I just fell in love with The Woman from Lydia.
Yes.
So after I kind of got done with the first two books in that series, I was like, okay, so I need to read another one by another author, because I needed to see, okay, is it Angela Hunt do I like, or is it the genre that I like?
Right.
And everyone that
Right.
I've read, I've really liked. So
Right.
yeah. So anyway, I do have this idea niggling around in my mind but I can't quite get the confidence to write it, because I just don't feel like I know enough about biblical times and historical times to
Yeah.
tackle it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
There is some
but
research.
I really enjoyed this book. Again, I still have that little bit of a stumbling block in my mind, but when I first start historical fiction books, because I'm just like, for some reason in my mind, my first knee-jerk reaction is I'm not going to like it.
Yeah.
And it was a phenomenal book. It really was. I look forward to going in and looking at the rest of the book. The characters were just, I loved Betsy, her family, you get to see sort of the consequences of having an alcoholic in the family. That really can put what's the word I'm thinking, that can really make the family dynamic difficult. Thankfully, I've never had to deal with that in my life. We've never really had alcoholics in the family, so it was kind of fun to sort of see their journey and the consequences that person's action can have on the whole family.
Right.
Of course, I loved Luther. He's just he was a phenomenal villain. It was just just the whole feeling of the book. It was just a very pleasant read. So if you've not read any of Heidi's books, I would definitely encourage. I would say start with the first book and move through the series. But I will say, having not read the first four in the series, I did not feel lost starting with the fifth one. So, but as an author, you would probably recommend that people start with book one if you had a preference.
Well, just because it's so fun to see the growth of the characters.
It is, yeah, and you really did. You saw, you got to see, and even Gabe. The book 5 sort of delved into things that he, went through in previous books. And like I said, even though I hadn't read them, it still gave me some insight into him, and you got to see sort of his growth. And I'd imagine we're going to see even more in the next. Are they going to be in the next book? Is he?
Yes, he will. He's deputy, so he's got to have some little cameo appearance.
Some cameo. So is there anything else you want to say about the book? Is there anything you want the readers to know about it? Or
boy, I don't think so, but Brett, thank you for doing this.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It's always fun. I love that we have connected over time and that we have been able to do that. Now we've actually seen each other. That's good. We've had some phone calls. One of the best way for a reader to see if they even like my style of writing is to download that either the ebook or the audiobook that's on my
Hmm.
website. And what that'll do is just give them an opportunity to see if they like how I write, which is it's not every writer writes the same, and then they will have that background of what the entire series is about.
Yeah, for sure.
I would love the opportunity to just tell a minute about my audiobooks.
Yeah, do that.
Well, I have my audiobooks right now I have 3 that are up. Contemporary that is Dial for Endearment. And the exciting thing about that book is that it is a story of a blind woman, and my narrator is blind. She read that book
Really?
while using Braille and then narrated it at the same time.
Wow.
It is just a super cool book to be able to know that narrator is also 100% since birth blind, and so it's
That
really
is
really
amazing.
yeah. So that book is
Now, so you had to have your book translated into Braille.
she has a Braille reader, and so I just sent her
Oh,
a
okay.
Word document of that book, and then she runs it through a program that she has.
Oh,
That
okay. And it turns it into
Yes, she puts her fingers
Braille
on
text.
on her keyboard, and that keyboard,
Wow.
she just kind of reads it as it goes along. Yeah, I
That's
can't even
amazing.
I can't even figure out the numbers in Braille, so I can't imagine how she's doing words. Um,
Yeah, that's amazing.
yeah,
Wow.
so that book is available anywhere that you can get an audiobook, and it's my favorite place for that one is on YouTube because it's for free. So
Hmm.
anybody can go and listen to just look for Heidi Gray McGill on YouTube and you'll be able to find that. I have
And the name of
another
that one is what was the
Dial E for Endearment.
okay.
Yes.
For
And
those of you that are watching this on YouTube, I'll flash the cover on there so people can kind of see it.
thank you.
Um,
I have another book, A Bride for Harley, and it's a standalone. It is not YA, but it is absolutely appropriate for that young adult, um, preteen group. So it's about a 16-year-old
mhm.
girl, and she crosses the United States as a mail order bride of or marriage of convenience, proxy bride for with her sister. And it's the
Uh-huh.
story of this just snotty 16-year-old girl, and we walk through a life change with her and who she becomes in Christ. And so it's a really, really fun story. And I reference Moby Dick throughout the entire book. So for our high
Uh,
schoolers who have had to read Moby Dick, it's a great story for them to read because they'll totally catch all the little notes that
oh,
are in there.
fun.
That's funny. But that narrator, it's done by a narrator. Her name's Emma, and it's on all the different sites wherever Audible, Spotify, all the places. But it's
Okay.
also available for free on YouTube.
And I noticed, I think if I remember correctly, that one is also available in Spanish.
It
There's a Spanish
is.
version of that. Yeah. So
Now,
how did that come about? What made you translate it into Spanish?
um, the message, the gospel is super clear in that book without in any way being preachy, and it's a short read. So I took the book and I put it through Google Translate, and I got it to a place where it was mostly translated into Spanish. And then
Hmm.
I asked one of my ESL students who had been an advanced level student if she would be willing to translate that book. So she took the version from Google and went, there's still a whole lot that needs to be done. Don't trust Google
Uh,
Translate. And a couple of the things were, so there are 3 chickens in this book, and she names them breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And there's a reason for that.
okay.
Yeah, they're gonna be food. And
They're going to be
so
on the table pretty
that's
soon.
right.
Yeah.
But Google Translate in Spanish, there really is not a breakfast, lunch, and dinner. There are 3 different
Oh.
meals. They just call them something very different. And so there were
Oh.
little tiny places in the book where she said, I do not understand what this means. And then also in the translation of sharing the gospel, just traditional church phrases did not translate, and she was clueless. And so it took a
Oh.
lot of work for her to get that done, but man, was it worth it. And so
Yeah.
now I
Well,
have that one's in Spanish.
And as an author, again, there's a moral in what you just said. When I first started writing, I used Pro Writing Aid, which is a author enhancement writing tool. That does not take the place of editing.
No.
Do not trust any kind of software to do the work for you. You still have to pay someone to get an expert of somehow to make sure that what you're trying to say is really what you're trying to say.
Right. So then I contracted with Lynette Bonner's girl, Amy Lilly, and she has now narrated both my prequel, The Deep in My Heart, that's available for free, and then Audiobooks 1, Desire of My Heart, and then coming soon is book 2, Written on My Heart. And so I will try to have one audiobook made a year. It's very expensive and doesn't have a high return.
That's why I haven't delved into it yet. It's expensive.
Exactly. Because I'm an audiobook listener, it's important to me. And I want to make that available to people. It's also that if I'm being on YouTube, and it's free on YouTube, it's just the courtesy, just like you would leave a review for a book on Amazon, if you listen to the book on YouTube, with the courtesy of a subscribe, a like, a comment, a heart, any of those things. It's always just a courtesy to be able to do that.
Yes.
But I'm reaching a different group of people. And this is where I am finding my different countries my newsletter subscribers are growing from other countries because I have put this up on YouTube. So it's a whole new mission field.
And once you get to the to the point on your channel that you can become monetized, then you do make a little bit of money off of those listens on YouTube. And I think you are at that point now.
I did.
See, that's another thing. I can't get. A couple months ago.
Yeah, and it's been very helpful. It's just one of those additional streams of income. Nobody's getting rich over here, that's for sure. My husband is getting ready to do our taxes. We haven't done those yet, and he's like, "Well, I hope we made more than last year." I'm like, "I don't."
Don't think so. And that's another thing for people that are listening. Like if you are an aspiring author, or if it's something don't go into it expecting to make a lot of money.
Never.
Because especially in Christian fiction, not to diminish Christian fiction, but especially Christian fiction, that's not the route you want to go if you're looking for fame and fortune.
And it doesn't matter if you go traditionally published through a publisher like Tyndall or Bethany House or Random or Scholastic. It doesn't matter if you do that, or you go independently published, which is where I am in charge of everything for my book. I not only write it, but I secure my own editors, my own illustrators. I format the book myself. I get it up. I have to do all of my own marketing. I have to get my own street team. It's on me. I am my CEO, but I am also my chief bottle washer.
Yes.
And so,
we do everything that a traditional publisher does, but we fit the bill for it.
Yes.
Yeah. And you can't skimp on anything because, in fact, we had this conversation with the last author that I had on, but right before you. I don't want people to look at my book and be like, "Oh, indie author." Right. I want my cover to look like it belongs on the same shelf as a Karen Kingsbury book or a Francine Rivers book or a Ted Decker book.
Yeah.
I don't want any part of my book to scream indie author.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, you have to spend some money. So, but an interesting thing about Amazon, do you know they took away my ability to leave reviews on their site?
It happens all too frequently.
Because they didn't like one of my reviews.
Yes.
And it wasn't anything bad. Something like, it was a Christian fiction book. Something in the book didn't really match with biblical theology. So I just sort of, and I did, it wasn't even a bad review. I think I gave it 3 stars, and I very rarely give 3-star reviews.
Right.
Because, there is such a thing as, oh, you gave me a 3-star, I'm going to go give you a 3-star, even though I haven't read your book.
Right.
But I said something in the review about, I tend to, when I do reviews, I tend to do the sandwich method, especially if I'm going to leave anything critical. I'll say something that I really liked about the book, and then I'll say, but I didn't really care for da-da-da-da-da.
Right.
And I posted something in the review about and it was a scripture. I posted a scripture in the review. I was like, something in the book, they sort of indicated that blah, 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 but this is what scripture says. So what they said really wasn't in line with scripture. And Amazon said it went against their community standards and closed me down to where I can't even leave reviews on Amazon now.
Yeah, but that's the beauty of having Goodreads now associated with Amazon, is that you can leave a review on Goodreads, on BookBub, there are multiple sites where you can leave a review.
Yes.
And then, but the one with Goodreads, it will align with
you can actually see your Goodreads numbers on Amazon, which is nice. So
and when they are the same, it's just confirming. When they're totally different, that says something itself.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been such a fun conversation. I've enjoyed doing this. We need to do it again sometime.
Yes, and I hope we will. And I hope we have a chance to bring in some information about how we work on our books and what process we go through.
Yes. Well, in fact, we were going to do that probably in the next 2 or 3 months. That was my plan. But it looks like that's not going to happen right now, because starting with the next, and this is very exciting for the podcast,
it is.
But starting with the next podcast episode, we are partnering up with Baker Publishing Group. They contacted me and was like, hey, we've listened to your podcast. We really enjoy it. And would you be interested in having some of the authors that are publishing books throughout the summer? Would you be interested in having some of them? And they sent me a list. And I said, well, yeah. I said, we would love to have any of them on. And so I emailed her back. I said, we can, if you just want me to pick 2 or 3, I'll do that. I said, or if you want to have them all on, we're happy to do that. And the lady emailed back. She was like, oh my goodness, if you would have them all on, we would love that. So we're having, I think, 23 authors throughout the summer that we're actually going to be on the podcast, and we're going to be talking to them about their upcoming books.
Yeah.
So, and there are some weeks when, we normally do every 2 weeks. Well, like every other week we publish a podcast, but during the summer, there are some weeks when we're actually going to be talking to 2 or 3 authors a week, just because there's not enough Saturdays.
You're not going to have time to write. You're going to be reading.
I know. I was like, oh my goodness, what was I thinking? Like, but I'm so happy to do it. But I'm starting to feel the pressure of it, because I'm like, I don't want to have them on unless I've read their book, because on our podcast, I'm not a huge podcast reader, but when I kind of got it in my mind that I wanted to do this podcast, I started listening to other sort of bookish podcasts, and especially Christian fiction, because I wanted to see what other people were doing.
Yes.
You can tell when podcast hosts are talking about the books, but they haven't read them.
Yes.
Whether they're just talking about the book or whether they're talking to the author, you can tell. And I'm like, okay, I don't want to do our podcast like that. If I'm going to have them on, I am going to read their book.
Yeah.
And of course, right now, Melanie, she's my podcast co-host, but and I'm not telling anything that she hasn't already told on here. She's going through, she's got cancer, and so she's going through chemotherapy. So she's kind of had to step back from the podcast for a while. So I've had a couple of podcast guest hosts.
Yeah.
And I told them, I said, I don't know how I'm going to do this, because there's no way I can read 3 books in 1 week. And they haven't even, the publishing company hasn't even started sending the books. So I'm actually starting to feel the pressure now, because I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to get all these books read. And so, but yeah, at some point I want to have you on. Heidi was very kind. I think it was last year, maybe 2 years ago. I put out a call to my Facebook people, and I was like, "Hey, I'm looking for a couple more beta readers. I've got 5 or 6 really good beta readers, and so I wanted a couple more. And so I think you shared my post on your social media, and one of yours was like, hey, I'd love to read one of your books. And she is phenomenal. Her name is Stephanie.
Yeah.
And
she is my oldest friend. I'm not going to tell you how many years, but we met when I was 11 and she was 12.
Oh, so you guys have a long history.
Yes.
Boy, she is good. She is a very good beta reader.
Yes.
Yeah. And good beta readers are worth their weight in gold. Yeah. And I always tell my beta readers, you're reading this book before it goes out into the world.
Yeah.
This is the time to be very critical.
Yeah.
If you do not feel comfortable pointing things out to me and making suggestions, then you don't need to be on. No, you don't need to be on my team. I'd rather hear it from you than in a review. So,
Yes.
yeah. So I'm so glad that you put that out there, because if that had never happened, I would never have recruited Stephanie onto my team. So
Yes.
she's phenomenal. So at some point, I think you and I and Stephanie might come on, and maybe we'll have a conversation, like kind of how we work together collaboratively with beta readers. I'm not sure exactly what that'll look like, but I think that might be interesting to readers to kind of see how things work from that perspective. So that's coming up. But yeah, for the remainder of the summer, we're going to have a whole slew of authors on here, and I'm looking so forward to it. Our first one, the next one is going to be Anne Gabhart.
Oh,
Yeah.
fabulous.
Yeah, she's going to be my first one. And I can't even remember. Robin Jones Gunn is going to be
Oh, my
on.
goodness. Great.
Sarah Brun.
Runs?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh,
Yes. I don't want to name any more names because I can't remember them all. I don't want to leave anyone out.
oh,
But throughout the summer, all these guys are coming, and I'm looking so forward to it. So,
good.
Heidi, tell the listeners where they can follow you on social media, or if they wanted to look at your website, kind of tell them where they can find you.
The easiest thing is just to Google Heidi Gray, Gray, McGill, McGill, HeidiGrayMcGill.com. You'll get to my website, and there are buttons to get you to any other of my social media. And at the top right, there'll be tabs of the list of books that I have. There are book club questionnaires already there. If you have a book club and you want to read my book and use what I've already created, you don't have to create your own questions. My free book is up there. My statement of faith is also up there. I would love to have you read that. And then there's a place where you can also subscribe to my blog posts, which are more of if you like my books, then you at least know my heart. But if you want to know my heart, then you need to read my blog posts. So it's more of devotionals of where I am today and what I'm doing and how life is affecting me. And so
it's kind of more personal.
Yes, my blog posts are very personal and more devotional style.
Oh, okay. Well, in fact, I may need to do that because you're just such a delightful person. And I think we have talked a couple times, and you've actually have become just a little bit of a mentor to me as well. Kind of helping me through. I just published my 7th book, so I'm no expert in anything, but of course, I'm learning more. So you're kind of, we've talked a little bit about, YouTube, how to maybe get better views on YouTube. So you've been just a delight to just sort of talk to and run things past. And I appreciate you so much. You've been a real blessing to me.
People have done it for me, and I just could not imagine gone through this without those who are willing to help me.
Yeah, absolutely. So just paying it forward. Yeah. Well, it has been so nice to have you on. If anybody wants to follow us, we're on the podcast. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're actually on TikTok now. We do little short clips of all of our interviews. So you can just do Bookish Introverts podcast on YouTube. You can look us up as it's under my name, but you can just Google, you can just type into search engine Bookish Introverts podcast, and that'll pull up all of our videos. I'm on YouTube and Instagram as Brett Nelson author. So I've got a website. So there's just pretty much all you got to do is just type it in Google, and that'll pull up everything you need to know about us, right?
Right.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Well, I think we're going to end this, Heidi, but thank you so much for coming on, and I look forward to doing it again with you sometime.
Thank you, Brett. It's been my pleasure.
Absolutely. And we'll talk to all you guys later. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us on the Bookish Introverts podcast, where together we explore the worlds within the pages. Until next time, stay bookish.